The dashboard again. I wanted to do a quick one, big addition. Wanted to do this. I had this idea kind of before football season even started, and after we kind of got everything else nailed down and things running, I took the time to uh, create it. It is not my own idea, but it's another thing that people know, people talk about, but it's just not that widespread because it is kind of tricky to figure it out. But with the help of Python coding and, of course, the friendly AI bots that can kind of know the math and iron out the problems for me, we've got something. So we're talking about expected fantasy points here, and this is a measure of opportunity. I don't think a lot of people who see this, they might not fully understand what it is. So I want to explain that first and then show you where it is and how to use it. So what it is it's not based on player skill at all. It's just it assigns an expected fantasy point projection, not a projection. It assigns an expected fantasy point total for each play. Best way to explain it is with examples. So if if you're a running back and you get a carry up the middle on 1st and 10 from the 20-yard line, right? Like you're just starting the drive and you're at the 20-yard line and you get a carry up the middle. You're probably not going to score a touchdown on that play, right? And again, it's regardless of team, regardless of skill, and we'll touch on that. But so the expected fantasy points there would be about the average. The average carry is what, 4.5 yards, which would be 0.4, 0.5 fantasy points if you're playing for 1 point for every 10 yards. So that would be about the average per carry for a running back, right? So, but if you take an example of, let's say you're at the goal line, you have a first and goal from the 1 yard line, and you get a carry. That carry is worth a lot more than you can only get 0.1 points from the yardage because there's only 1 yard to go. But obviously, there's a very high chance of getting a touchdown, which would be 6 points. So a 1 yard carry for a touchdown is 6.1 fantasy points. Now, there's also the chance you get stopped or fumble or whatever. So you're not going to get an expected 6.1 there, but you will get an expected 3 or 4, depending on where the run is, depending on the situation and some other things. So I think that kind of captures it. It is really just looking to aim at. It's looking to capture opportunity. If a guy got 7 carries from the 1 yard line in a game and didn't score a touchdown, he'd have 0 fantasy points from those carries, probably negative. But you would still be feeling pretty good about that. You'd be like, okay, well they're getting to the goal line and they're giving this guy carries, so we should get touchdowns eventually. That's the goal of it, to just see what should have happened, maybe more than what did happen. The pitfall of it um, is that, yeah, like you'll assign the same thing for Najee Harris as you will for Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley is gonna actually turn in a higher average fantasy point production on the same carry, right? If you give Barkley 100 carries from the 20-yard line and give Najee, Barkley's going to turn in more fantasy points there. So it doesn't capture that. So in your head, you have to kind of adjust for that player skill stuff. But we don't really want to do that anyway. We just want to see raw opportunity, and then we can use that information. It applies to quarterbacks and receivers as well. Receivers, you'll get an expected fantasy point for every target, even if it's not caught in real life. If you have a wide open target 5 yards away and you drop it, that's 0 actual fantasy points, but it's 1.2 or 1.3 or something like that in the expected, because most of the time you would expect to catch that, get the 1 PPR point and some yardage. So there's that. And then it matters quite a bit as well. Like a target in the end zone will be worth a lot more expected fantasy points than a target elsewhere. Same for passers. Passers, just the same thing. Just all their attempts. What's the average attempt of that nature? What does that on average deliver in fantasy points? So that's that. The one thing to consider is that, well, let's show it. I'm showing the dashboard here. You've been staring at the screen the whole time, and we haven't shown it yet. But it's here on the team summary page. It's just I put it right there for everybody. So Trey McBride for Arizona had 14 expected fantasy points last week on his 9 targets. The running backs also got a filter here. So you see James Conner had his 12. And then up here, the quarterbacks. Oh, it's not there. I need to put that there. I will put that there after this is over. So when you actually load the dashboard, it'll show up there. There's also it's also going to be here. It's going to be on the QB data tab right there. Expected fantasy points passer. I do have to separate that out because in the data set, there's a column for who threw the ball and a column for who rushed the ball and a column for who received the ball. So I can't combine quarterback rushing and passing expected fantasy points together. So what you'll see here for Josh Allen, this is important to note. On the quarterbacks, this is only what Allen was expected to do fantasy point wise with his throwing. This does not include rushing. So to get the whole picture, you have to kind of do the math yourself. But if we go here, go to Buffalo, you see 18. So you would add another Josh Allen. You add another 12.6 there. So he had 20 for his throwing and 12.6 for his rushing, with his 14 attempts and often really close to the goal line. So 14 rushing attempts would turn into not 12.6 fantasy points most of the time. But since they're close to the goal line, he gets a lot of credit for that, and that piles up. It's also right here, just so you can see, and I do make the note here that QB expected fantasy points does not take into account the expected fantasy points on rushes. So that's where you have to put them together again. I have no way of combining them here, at least one that I haven't figured out yet. But yeah, you can see here, go to sort by a team, look at Josh Allen. Okay, he had 20.74 in week 1 passing, and then the 12.56 there, and you can add those together. Down here, I also have it. This is all kind of ugly. I need to make this a little bit bigger, but things will look better as I go. I just wanted to get this out today. Here you can see how they actually divide up between rushing and receiving. So James Cook, he had 6.9 as a receiver and 10.0 as a rusher, and that adds up to 17. So you can see the split there, but I need to make that bigger and touch it up. So yeah, and then the other one really good way to look at this is I put a differential here on the rush receiving per game tab. So this will give you his expected per game and his DK, his actual fantasy points per game. Anytime you see DK on my stuff, it just means fantasy points. I just use the DraftKings scoring system. So Drake London was the unluckiest, you could say, of the day. He had like 23.6 expected and only 13.5 actual. He had 15 targets and only 7 of them were caught, or 7 or 8 or something like that. So that's a really nice way to see buy low, or the reverse, also sell highs. The one thing to note on the sell highs would be you're going to have a lot of quarterbacks in here, I guess, because, okay, yeah. So that's another important note, that the quarterback, since this 12, this is only his rushing, and then this obviously includes, so that's not useful there. And I should make a note about that, but we'll hide quarterbacks for now. So Derrick Henry, these are the kind of guys that are going to break this thing. I mean, Derrick Henry is always going to show up over expectation just because he's such a monster, right? Like if you want any running back in the league to just take a normal carry, he's up there with the best. He will always, more yards after contact, more explosive runs, whatever it is. So he's going to beat that quite a bit. But you can see that, yeah, he didn't quite deserve the 34 DraftKings points. I mean, he had, 2 30-plus yard rushing touchdowns, and that's just not something that's going to happen most weeks. So you can kind of get an idea about who was a little bit lucky, who's a little bit unlucky, and just the whole picture there. So I'm really excited about this. I'm going to use it a lot in my writing and in my own fantasy leagues and stuff. So that's it. I wanted to show you that. Talk to you later.